Welcome. I'm Smart Brief editor Jan van Valkenburg, and I'm here with Clarence Russ Anderson, who leads the Central Market SLED team for Verizon's public sector team. He serves state, local, and education stakeholders. Thanks for being with us, Russ.
Thank you for having me.
Russ, why is it so hard to measure the digital divide?
That's a great question. Peeling back the layers there, I think part of the reason why it's so hard to measure is because it's so fluid. When you think about the members of the community that don't have consistent access to internet connectivity, consistent access to cellular phones, things that you and I maybe take for granted that have really become a utility and just as important as electricity and having running water in the home. A lot of the members of the community that we live in are potentially one major event away from really facing those challenges. So I think that's one of the reasons why it is so hard to really measure the digital divide, because it's a fluid gap that we have there. And then there's also just events that are ultimately going to lead to ebbs and flows with how big that divide actually is. With that being said, it's super important that we do our best to try to survey the community, to try to reach out to those stakeholders, those members of the community, to identify who does have challenges in those areas, because it's going to be crucial that we figure out what that sample size is so we can really rally around those end users to make sure that we give them the connectivity, the technology that they need in that critical utility.
I think there's often a misunderstanding, though, that it's as if it's one target audience or one group of people that's in a digital divide, and it's actually many groups. So, which is why, again, it's hard to measure. With so many different audiences to work with, who should lead a digital inclusion campaign?
I think that's an excellent question. And to your point, there's a lot of different subsets. We need to look at members of the community that are taking advantage of free reduced lunch programs, those first generation college students and Pell Grant recipients, taking a look at the senior service side of the house, and just members of our community that aren't as familiar with technology and that are also living under the poverty line. So ultimately, to try to answer that question with who should really lead that, I think it needs to be a collective. It has to be a partnership between the public sector as well as the private sector. Private sector is going to have some of the different resources and technologies that can really make a difference. But if we don't have those passionate stakeholders from the public sector, whether it's in higher ed, digital inclusion officers, digital equity officers, members of the local cities that are also serving on those 4 teams to try to make a difference in partnership with the counties that they work with, then we're not going to be approaching it the right way. Ultimately, it's a very complex challenge, and it's a very fluid and dynamic group of individuals. So the way that we're going to make a difference is if we have a collective of thought leadership really aligned and making sure that we're working together to ultimately make a difference for these individuals.
And how does Verizon fit into these discussions?
Verizon fits in as a thought leader in this space. Verizon fits in as someone that's an agency and an entity that has had a lot of experience trying to make a difference in this space. If you look at Verizon's background, there's a lot of different moments that I could point to, but one of the most essential moments that I'll use is just the work that we did during the COVID-19 pandemic. It flipped everyone's life just upside down overnight. And one of the things that we really had to help solve for was how to connect those students from K through 12 that did not have internet access from home. What about those kids that had to go to library, or they had to go to a public restaurant and hook up to their Wi-Fi to be able to do distance learning for 6-8 hours of the day? That was really a moment in time where I'm very proud of our leadership team and the different stakeholders with Verizon that worked together to assemble what we call our distance learning program. And that program, we provided extreme subsidy, discounted internet connectivity to hundreds of thousands of students throughout the US. And the just the impact that that had, just being able to watch the news and seeing those kids that are huddled around just a tree with that family that's trying to grab Wi-Fi from the next building over, and being able to have that mobile internet they could carry with them to help make sure that they were hitting those educational milestones was great. It was so impactful to see. But as we went through that journey, we just learned so much. And in that journey, we've really started to evolve our digital inclusion scope, our footprint, whatever you want to call it, to really start to focus on, okay, how do we take that to the next level? How do we impact the adults that are in our communities that are economically disadvantaged, don't have this community, they don't have this connectivity. So that's ultimately how the digital inclusion program was really born here within Verizon Wireless. So now we have a program to not just offer extreme subsidies when it comes to internet connectivity, but also to provide individuals with subsidized phone access, whether we're talking about smartphones or basic phones, because we know it's a utility. If you're going to be applying for roles, if you're doing job interviews, if you're paying bills, if you're communicating with friends, families, your local city, your local county, internet connectivity is essential. So we learned a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're working to bridge the gap before, but now we have a lot of key learnings that we're leveraging to ultimately make a difference today.
And among those learnings, can you talk a little bit about adoption, how to encourage adoption once a program is in place?
Yeah, when I think about adoption, it really comes to sharing the narrative. We have to communicate about the narrative. We have to communicate about where we are finding pockets of success. We have to make sure that we're having cohesive, collaborative conversations, not just with a university that we're working with, not just with a local nonprofit, but really all the stakeholders that they're working with additionally. It kind of goes a little bit back to that. You have to have the right stakeholder group point that I mentioned a little bit earlier. But ultimately, once we do have the right group and we can carve out that usability, make sure that the stakeholders also understand how to actually use the technology, that's what's really going to make this grow. And as we get more and more agencies, as we get more and more institutions aware of programs that are out there in the ecosystem, you also have word of mouth that's going to continue to spread. That's ultimately how we scale. We have to get the right people in the room. We have to develop the programs. We have to execute on the programs. And then we have to keep that conversation alive, because that's where it's going to scale to impacting more and more and more members of the community that ultimately have this need.
It's a dynamic problem that requires a dynamic solution. Great. Thank you, Russ, and thank you for listening. This concludes our Q&A with Clarence Russ Anderson from Verizon.
Thank you.